In today's episode, we will be exploring the life and death of Robin Williams. Now on with the show.
Hi, guys, and I am back for another mystery. I hope everyone is doing fantastic. Today is not a mystery. Today we are looking at us at a suicide, and I just want to know why. This is someone I really used to enjoy. A great comedian. Some people say the greatest comedian of our time. I would not say that, but for some people, maybe he was. But a great actor, and this is Robin Williams. Robin Williams was fantastic. And in case you don't remember Robin Williams, I don't know what rock you were under. He started off, and some of you may be too young, or you might remember him from Mork and Mindy, which is a very cute show about a alien that comes down to Earth in Boulder, Colorado, and lives with a young lady who I think they end up. I didn't watch it all the way through, but I think they end up getting married or talk about getting married. But he made some movies. I'm just going to name some of my personal ones, and you probably have yours. And by the way, if you have one of his movies that you like, and I didn't mention it, put it in the comments. I would love to know what it is, just to jog my memory too. But I absolutely love Mrs. Doubtfire. I love that scene when he was cooking, and then all of a sudden his bra caught on fire right on his breast. I thought that was hilarious. Good Will Hunting. Oh my goodness, that was an incredibly touching movie. The role he played in that. Dead Poet Society. Fantastic. He was the genie in Aladdin. Who could forget that? And, I know they did the remake with Will Smith, the live action one, but nobody was better than, and I think Will would agree with me, nobody was better than Robin Williams in that genie role. The Birdcage. Oh, The Birdcage. I watch it to this day and it just cracks me up. Hook, another great one. Those are just a few of them. So I do like to give you just a little bit of background on the individual before I really break them down. So we look at Robin Williams, and he was born July 21st, 1951. He was born in Chicago, Illinois. So I like that, Midwesterners. His father was a executive, a motor car executive, and his mother had been a beauty pageant winner, I think down in Florida, had been a model. Very attractive lady she was. After a time, they moved from Chicago to Detroit, but they didn't actually live in Detroit. If you are from the Detroit area, you know about Bloomington Hills, a very wealthy area in Detroit. They lived there. After his father decided to retire, they ended up moving to San Francisco, California. And that is when Robin's life sort of really changed. He was accepted in Juilliard, actually in New York, New York. And you know who ran Juilliard? John Houseman. If you know John Houseman, let me know. John Houseman, he was the actor. Oh my goodness, I can't think of that show. It was about lawyers and everything, but it was so good. He was the professor. John Houseman was the teacher. Now, he was supposed to be there 4 years, but he only stayed three. The reason being is that John Houseman thought that he was way too talented, and there wasn't really much that Juilliard was going to be able to add to him because he seemed to have more of a penchant for comedy. Although he could do drama, but he was more of a comedic actor, and they just felt that he was a little bit better than the school. So he went back to California and he started to bartend and perform in different comedy clubs all around town. Then he went on an audition and he got the job. And that was in 1978 with Happy Days. If you remember Happy Days, it was Fonz, Richie, who else? Richie. Oh gosh, I forgot everybody. Actually, well, you guys will tell me. But anyways, the cast of characters, and he came as sort of just a one show person, one show walk on guest, and he came in as an alien. But Gary Marshall, who directed the show at that time, thought he was so fantastic that he actually gave him a spinoff, and that was Mork and Mindy. And that's the show I was telling you about, where he would wear those suspenders and they would be the color of the rainbow. He would bounce around and jump around so much so that the writers didn't even write all of his dialogue because he was so great at doing improv. In addition, he would get the cameramen really upset because everyone would usually go and stand on their mark, and this is where you do your performance from, but he would be all over the place. So they hired a separate cameraman just for him. Make sure you guys can hear me. They hired a cameraman, one cameraman. It wasn't the only camera, but they also had this cameraman that would follow him all around the stage as he performed his different comedies and jumping around and bouncing around. And if you watch the show, you know how he would bounce around off of furniture and everything. In fact, it got a little bit silly for me after a while. It just got to be a little bit too much. But his fame and Mork and Mindy, it just blew up. He was like the toast of Hollywood. And at this time, he learned about the dark side of Hollywood. So if you're wondering, well, what's the dark side of Hollywood? Well, drugs. He got into doing cocaine, alcohol, casual sexual relationships with different individuals. He used to do cocaine with Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor's even said that. You can find it on YouTube or anywhere talking about that relationship. One night, as a matter of fact, he was doing it so much that he went to see a good friend of his at the Chateau Marmont. That's right on Sunset Boulevard. We used to go past it all the time. Still standing there today. That friend was John Belushi. He came to the hotel and he was with a young Robert De Niro. Yes, Robert De Niro. They went to, and this is all alleged, right? Entertainment only. I'm just telling you the tea. So they went into the hotel room, and John was in there laying on the floor. He was with a female friend of his, supposed supplier, I don't know, by the name of Kathy. I don't know, wink, wink. Anyways, uh, John told he was just rolling around, writhing in pain and discomfort, and he told Kathy to get rid of the people that were there, which was Robin and Robert. So as Robin is walking out of the door, he turns around, just trying to be funny, and he looks down at John looking so sick, and he tells John, "Call me in the morning if you're still alive." And wink, wink, ha ha, he left. That next morning, John Belushi had died from an overdose of what they call an 8 ball. I think that's heroin and cocaine mixed together. Um, so after that, you would think that Robin would have enough of doing the drugs and the alcohol because this was a very good friend of his. This wasn't just somebody he randomly knew, but it didn't. It picked up the pace more and more. And he was having affairs. He was doing more drugs, more alcohol. It wasn't until he left out of Hollywood and they got like a ranch outside of, LA, Hollywood, what have you, that he decided that he was going to clean up his act. And he basically went cold turkey and stopped cocaine, stopped drinking alcohol for 20 years. He replaced it with cycling because that helped him with his depression. Now, I talked to a very good friend of mine who was an expert in addictive behavior, and Robin had clearly had a very addictive behavior. So that tells me right away somebody at the house had addictions. Let me take a quick look. Yeah, somebody had addictions. Yeah, yep, I know who had addictions. Mommy had addictions, but somebody had addictions. And so he just modeled that behavior. You're an executive, you're executive wife, you're having dinner parties, you're drinking, and he took it to the extreme because this guy was a guy that was chock full of energy, almost like manic energy, jumping around crazy. If you've ever seen his comedy shows, comedy HBO or specials, Mork and Mindy, a lot of his movies, very erratic type of behavior. So once he wasn't doing the illegal substance anymore, he switched over to the cycling and he got deeply, deeply into cycling. That was just another addiction to cover the other addiction. After a while, he went back into touring again. Now, this is what led to his divorce from his first wife. He started touring again and he went on a movie set, went to Alaska, I believe, and he felt like, wow, this is so beautiful. I'm at the highest part of the world. This is the end of the world. I could have a drink. I can have one drink. I can just handle it. And he had a drink, and as soon as he had that drink, he went back to drinking as much as he always was. In addition, he ended up in an affair. He had a 2-year affair with a woman who used to serve cocktails at a particular comedy club, and it went well for a while, but she wanted to break the relationship off. When she broke the relationship off, he threatened to kill himself, to throw himself out of a window. Did that foreshadow what was happening to him? Absolutely. And in fact, she sued him for $2.6 million, saying that he gave her herpes. Now, he never admitted that. He never denied that. He just settled the case and let it go away. And right after that, he was divorced from his first wife. Now, we didn't hear anything about that. I personally didn't. I didn't know anything about it. But this next scandal of his, I did hear about. Once he divorced his wife, it wasn't long that they had had a nanny who was taking care of their son. At this time, they had the son that I told you about. And come to find out that he was having an affair with the nanny all along. So much so that before his first divorce was even final, his second going to be wife was already pregnant. So that put a nail in the coffin of his first marriage, and he married the second wife. Now, at this time, he was back to drinking again. And once he got triggered, it picked up even more. And his trigger was Christopher Reeves. You remember the guy that played Superman? Not the old Superman back in the day when we were kids, but that Superman with the dark hair, the one that was in the horse riding accident that got hurt on that jump and was paralyzed. That Christopher Reeves. He and Robin actually went to acting school, Juilliard, together years ago, and they had stayed very best friends. Well, Christopher Reeves died of his paralysis and everything else that went along with that. That was a trigger for Robin. He just picked up right where he left off with not only alcohol, but drugs as well, allegedly. So now we're in 2006 and he finds himself back in rehab. But he gets clean from the rehab and he goes back and he has another scandalous affair. And by 2009, or excuse me, 2008, his second wife, who had even staged an intervention for him to get him in to the rehab center in 2006, she'd had enough. And by 2008, she divorced him as well. Now, by 2009, he was back touring and making comedy shows. Like I said, he was doing benefits with Whoopi Goldberg, Billy Crystal, all those things. He ended up one night coming off a stage and he was very short of breath. He was having chest pains. They rushed him to the hospital and he had to go immediately into surgery. He had to have a heart valve removed. Okay. At this point, he was starting to go downhill. His health was failing him. And I think the fact that John Belushi had died, his best friend Christopher Reeves had died, and now this was happening to him, this really affected him. He's got a moon in Pisces. Let me just put that out there for you. So that meant that he would really feel when these people died. Just more than sympathetic, more than empathetic. He would literally be able to step into their shoes of these things. And so he felt them very deeply. Where we might feel them deeply, he felt them as if it was happening to him. By 2011, he ended up remarrying because he really needs somebody to take care of him after the heart surgery. So he married a young lady who was actually a friend of his, caretaker of him, but then they ended up getting married. At this point, he started to go down even worse. Robin was having terrible tremors. He was having anxiety attacks. He was very depressed. He was even experiencing paranoia. In fact, when he was making Night at the Museum Part 2, he was so lost in everything that he could barely remember even the simplest lines, where they had to close down the set for a while so he could possibly get it together. He couldn't remember any of the lines. He also was having very erratic behavior. One moment he would be absolutely perfectly fine. The next minute he'd be doing something so outlandish, or maybe would come into the living room and didn't know, like snap out of it and not know how he got there or what happened. It just really started going downhill for him. Robin and his third wife started having him tested, all kind of blood tests and CAT scans, MRIs, everything to find out what was going on. And they really couldn't see anything. And so they sort of assumed that with the tremors coming on worse and worse, that he had Parkinson's disease. So they started treating him for Parkinson's disease, only to find out that after his death, they found out that they were treating him for the wrong thing all along. Now, at this point, he was at his very rock bottom. Now, this is 2014 because he passed away, let me see, on August 11th, 2014. There's that 11 again. August 11th, 2014, and he felt very depressed. His health was failing him. He had terrible tremors. He had loss of memory, like I said, erratic behavior. He wasn't getting calls for the movies. The word was kind of going out that he's having problems. He had a series that they were hoping that was going to last for a while. That got canceled right away. He was paying out a lot of money from the divorces with alimony. His fame, that was another addiction of his. His fame had gone away. People weren't knowing him like that. There was a younger generation. He was getting older, so he wasn't getting the big hoopla. He had his sort of core, but that wasn't enough. You have that fame, you want more and more and more. So on the last night of his life on August 10th, I guess it was August 10th. They say August 11th, but it could have been the night before. But August 11th will say that. That's what they have on his death certificate. He kissed his wife goodnight, and they didn't sleep in the same rooms. And that's only because the doctor felt like they needed to be in separate rooms. Why? I don't know. That kind of puzzled me. But I guess they said that he could rest better that way. But if my husband was going through all this, I think I'd want to sleep in the room with him. But that's just a side note. But they slept in certain rooms. They kissed each other goodnight, but there was a sort of finality to the kiss goodnight. He went in the room. He ended up taking his belt. He hung it over the top of the door and closed the door, so the belt was stuck over the top of the door and hanging down. He put the belt part around his neck. He stood on a chair and he jumped off the chair and he killed himself. Now, the next day, his assistant came in and he had an entry into his room. She knocked and knocked, which she never had to knock at the door, and she couldn't get through. He wasn't answering. He wasn't answering. She went around. She came into the room. She saw him dead, as well as she saw a bloody knife on the floor. Come to find out, he had also slit his wrist. He was determined that he was going to kill himself, and the slitting the wrist, I guess, didn't work, and then he did hang himself. So I want to take a look at some things about Robin that I really need to know. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at his birthday. And let me just say this to you, and I know that you guys know this. Oftentimes we see people on TV and they appear one way, but behind the scenes, they're not that person at all. And I often notice, and I don't know if you do too, but people that are comedians, they're so funny, we're just cracking up and this and that. They are the most miserable, unhappy, or angry people behind the scenes. It's as if the anger fuels the comedy. Okay. And he always did have a sort of angry, if you ever watched his act, he had this sort of angry energy that went with his comedy. And I can see why he was on a life path 8. And life path 8 can mean great wealth. In his case, he did, or a loss of wealth. But he had great wealth. He had that boss number. He could be the boss. He was the emperor. He would in fact, when he made the genie for the Aladdin, he didn't really want to do it. But he had told at that time the guy that was running Disney, I think his name was Katzenberger. Anyways, you guys can look it up. He told him, I'll do the genie, but I don't want to be made into a product. Don't merchandise me and the product or the genie. Well, the guy said he wouldn't, but turned around and did it anyway. And so when they wanted to do the genie or Aladdin part 2, he said no, he wouldn't do it. Well, they ended up firing, I think his name is Katzenberg, but I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. They fired him, and then they had to apologize for what happened to Robin, and then Robin decided to do it, as long as he wasn't merchandise. He wasn't about that because he was making enough money as it is. And let me tell you something. What you don't do is you come and you tell Disney what you will or will not do. Doesn't work like that. But for Robin, it did. So he had that number 8 number. But let me tell you something about number 8. They can be very harsh. They will talk to you any kind of way. You do not want to get in an argument with them because their tongue will slice you to shreds. They keep a Rolodex of everything that you did and they're going to bring it up and then some. They're going to call you every name in the book. They're going to humiliate you. They're going to tromps all over you. And that's what he would do. Very much like his father. Very much. You think about his father as an executive for one of the major motor or automobile. He couldn't be soft, and neither was Robin. Robin was had just went in. His birthday was July 21st, and he died on August 11th. So he was only a month into a number 8 personal year. A number 8 personal year for him would have reinvigorated his career, but he couldn't tolerate the number 7. He was just out of a number 7 year. A number 7 year, everything goes quiet. There's nobody would have been calling him for movies. Nobody would have been calling on him for performances or interviews because it's a time that you're supposed to go inside. You're supposed to be, introspective, retrospective, and then how can I change and how can I be better and how can I add more onto the planet? He didn't understand that. All he knew was more, more, more. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Whether it was alcohol, whether it was fame, the applause, the love from outside, not loving yourself from the inside, the cocaine, the stray women, all these. He had so many side relationships, it wasn't even funny. He just couldn't sit. He was so hyper, 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 hyper. And you know what I'm talking about if you know Robin Williams. He couldn't sit. And that really, really hurt him and brought him down with everything else coming on and everything being quiet. All he had was time to be in his head and think poorly of himself. So with him, as I looked at his chart, his whole life was fated. It was destiny. He was supposed to be on the planet to bring us laughter and levity and lightheartedness, and he did that job. Even though he had a lot of Virgo energy, he didn't think he did it as very well. That Virgo energy would have made him very much a perfectionist, always being hard on himself, but he did do a fabulous job. He was destined, and all his troubles would have been public. That's why I'm telling you, because everything that happened to him was always public for public consumption. All of his conflicts would have been public. His rising sign is in Scorpio. So I hate this though when people say, "Oh, Scorpio, sex, sex, sex." Well, it's more than just a Scorpio rising, but that would have made him sexy to people. And if you think about him back in the day, he was very nice looking, but he would have been very attractive to the opposite sex. He would have been mysterious and deep and emotional. He would have seemed like that. The rising sign is always your mask. It's not really who you are, but it's what people see. And so he would have seemed very irresistible, like a luscious, thick chocolate cake or creme brulee or something like that, that was just irresistible to women, but men too. They liked to work with him because he was a hard worker. That Scorpio energy would have made him very hard, very intense in anything he did. And that's why his energy was so hyped up. He was very intense. He had a son in Cancer that just made him very emotional, very warm. It would be attractive to people. There's a lot of water going on right there. He's got rising Scorpio, Sun, Cancer, Moon in Pisces, Mars in Cancer. Yeah, he was a whole pool, okay, of emotions, and that sensitivity would be appealing to women who would find him attractive, to men, they'd find him amiable and fun, and kids would enjoy him as well. His moon in Cancer is interesting to me because that tells you like everything you need to know. He was an addictive person. That tells me addictions, drinking, drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling. Yes, that's him. Yes. He was very lost in his dreams. He didn't even like the real world. He rather lived in the fantasy and making up these characters and these play friends and all this stuff. That was just everything to him. He was very vulnerable, okay? He would really get hurt if he got criticized by critics or anyone else or turned down. If his wife or his woman wasn't interested in intimacy, then he'd go out and find it someplace else because he'd be very hurt. The fact that he was going to throw himself out the window for one lady who wasn't even his wife, who was someone he was cheating on his wife with, tells you about him. He was actually more of an introvert. He was not the bubbly, outgoing person that he was. He just turned that on. That moon in Pisces allowed him to go into this fantasy world and pretend to be Robin Williams, but that really was not him. He could be very forgetful. He was very touchy, like walking on eggshells. Um, he was not very reliable. And ultimately, having that moon in Pisces made it all that, as well as burning him out, putting too much into it, taking in too much of other people's energy. He was just a magnet for taking in people's energy. And if it was negative, he was going to be negative. And doing the things he does were doing was that negative. I'm going to go along. I'm going to do this. This looks like a fun way I can escape. This is dark. I like that. I want to tap on the dark side. Yeah, that was him. Um, his Mars is in Cancer. I call that the killer. So he didn't kill anyone. Well, let me take that back. He killed himself. Okay. It killed himself rather than killing anybody else. But that tells me that he would get angry. He would do a lot of yelling. He had his Jupiter was in Aries, so that was big anger. He would get big man, okay? He would get big excited about things. He would rush in really big, and if he was let down and disappointed, he would get really angry, and you were going to get it. That guy that used the voice of Genie for products, I'm sure that he went off on that producer as well as the Disney people and everything else. So much so, he probably threatened everything in the world from lawsuits to quitting to exposing them for something they did wrong. That would have just been him. He wasn't the Mr. Nice Nice at all that we saw. He was about his business. That Scorpio energy would have made him strictly about his business. It would have made him, all that water would made him easily offended. And then he's got a Leo in Mercury. So in his mind, he believed the hype. That's the problem with a lot of these stars. They believe the hype, and he believed the hype about himself to where he was not so much fun like a Leo, but more demanding and domineering. I think he had a little short man syndrome, I'm feeling like. Yeah, very, it's my way or the highway. And he went through so many lives. That tells me that must be true. So I'm going to do something a little bit different for you guys before we finish up this tape. The thing I want to do a little bit different, which I haven't done on this particular side of my channel, is I'm going to talk to Robin. Now, I've already, before I came on, I centered myself. I stepped in my power, which is what I call it. And I asked my guides to bring him through. And so I have a particular set of cards. These are huge. And they work as my tools so I can speak through what is going on. So as I look at Robin, I'll show you as they come. I get the Four of Chalices or the Four of Cups, and that tells me that he did not want to be here anymore. He had done what he came from, and he was very happy. You see all that turbulent water? That was him. He was deeply in his feelings. He felt alone. He felt lonely. Even though he had a third wife, he felt very alone and lonely and isolated. It wasn't because he didn't love her. It was because that he loved people. He loved the applause, okay? And that wasn't happening anymore. And he almost wished that he was still that young guy that he was, that was the toast of the town. He couldn't accept that that comes and that goes. He intellectually knew, but he was so watery, so emotional that he couldn't really accept that. Okay. And so he didn't want this life anymore. He was done with it. And like I said, this is what came up. He said, I was the star. And he knows that he's going to be forever the star, but he was the star. He was huge. He had Academy Award nominations. I think he won one for Goodwill Hunting. At least he could have won more. He was fantastic. He did his job. He came to do what he had to do. His death, he told me, was karma. Okay. He had karma from a past life that he needed to clear up. And so he had to do this to help clear up that karma that was on his life. He was so lost, as once again, you can see that water energy. He was lost in his emotion. He was lost here on earth. For him, he wanted to come. When you come down here, you want to be here. You want to be in a particular circumstance. You plan how you want it to be. Then you go through the veil and you forget. And when he got here, he got lost. Okay. He got lost in that Hollywood life and all that fanfare. And he didn't go in. He looked for everything out. This is almost like in the heart chakra. He didn't go inside at all. He was into the outside. And it was a karmic debt that he had to repay. And so that is what he did. He has regrets, if you are wondering, he does. His regrets are his children, okay? So he had two children actually with his second wife. He had another son, but I think that son is with the first wife, and that son is was older and fine. It's the last two that he has regrets that he had to leave them. But he didn't leave them empty-handed. He left them well off. So financially, he left them, and he felt that that would be good for them, okay? But he has terrible regrets about going away and leaving them. But it was something that was destined for him to happen. This was already planned for him to do, to take his own life. Um, but at this point, he feels happy, okay? He's got the Two of Cups. He feels happy. He feels like he's back to himself, which he always was, an indigo child. Okay, very special individual that came down to this earth. That is my message from him to you. And I just want to see on the night of his death, I just want to know, did he, was his death, Robin, was your death strictly due to, he ended up having, did I tell you that? Lewy body dementia is what they found out he had after he passed. They were able to, look at slices of his brain. Is this what really killed you? This is what you were really upset about? With that type of dementia, it's different than Parkinson. I'm not a doctor, by the way, at all. This is just my own research. With Parkinson's disease, it affects your brain, but it affects one spot. But with Lewy body dementia, it will consume every part of your brain to where you don't have the long-term memory, you don't have the short-term memory. You do have things that mimic Parkinson's disease. Let's see. Did you die from Lewy body disease? He says he didn't want to bring his wife, his current wife, he didn't want to bring her into it. It's because he knew that she was going to talk him out of it. Okay. He didn't want to bring her in. Yeah, you know what? He felt absolutely trapped. He felt stuck inside himself. He wasn't, though. We know that because we have clear minds. But in his mind, in his condition, he was lost. Okay. He felt like he couldn't go any further. He didn't know what to do. He felt lost and trapped into this issue in his mind, and it wasn't the him that it used to be. Yeah, that's him. I'm not who I used to be. I'm stuck. My energy is stuck. I'm harsh. I'm angry. I'm sharp-tongued at everybody. This isn't me. And I made a fast decision. Everything happened so fast. I left this life so fast. And at the end, he says it's a gift to everybody. It is a gift, and it was a gift for him because he didn't want to go on suffering. Had he had known, which he didn't know at the time that he was living, he only had, if he had known, I'm going to say that if he knew he had Lewy body dementia, let me get my mouth right. If he knew he had that, he would have only had 5 to 8 years to live anyways. That is the proximity of it. He was very happy to be gone and to do it, and yeah, it had struck his brain. This is like the crown chakra up here. So uh this disease had struck in his brain. He didn't know what it was. They couldn't figure out what it was. So did he die from this? Is this what was causing him to die? Absolutely. This was the real reason why he died. It was from the all that drugs. I mean, he did a lot of cocaine and a lot of alcohol. He had heart disease. He had lost a lot of money through his own behavior. He knows what he did. He takes responsibility for that. And he said it was all karmic. And with him knowing that and take responsibility for that, he can go on and he can be clean with that. But guys, I hope you like the channel. I hope you like hearing about Robin Williams. Please subscribe, thumbs up, comment. Tell me your favorite Robin Williams movie. Guys, have a good night. Bye bye.